Hey, this is Brian Wright. Look, I've got to address something. In the comments section of my YouTube channel, on a daily basis, I get attacked with the idea that the UFC contracts are terribly restrictive. Dana White's the devil. All these guys are being put into indentured servitude or slavery, and on and on and on. Today, I have a guy coming on saying, look at Colby Covington. Poor Colby. Okay, let's break down UFC contracts really fast. First off, UFC contracts do not give Dana White the ability to shelve you, which was the main point of the argument today I was facing. Dana cannot dislike you and then shelve you. That does not happen. It may feel like it happens. It may be a narrative that somebody's putting out, but the contracts actually protect you from that situation occurring. When you first come into the UFC, you're given a 4-fight deal. That deal is that you're coming in at a base pay of X amount to show, X amount to win. Now, if you're a first-time fighter in the UFC, currently it's $12,000 to show with a $12,000 win bonus if you win. Then your pay goes up $2,000. So your next fight would be for $14,000 to show, $14,000 to win, and on and on and on. Now, if you lose, your pay stays the same. Okay, there we go. The thing about that contract is also it is 4 fights within 18 months. If you are not offered 4 fights within 18 months, you will get the show money for the fights that you are not offered. So this is not some long-term, you've got 4 fights for a million years and you're never going to be able to go elsewhere situation. It's always structured for X amount of fights over X amount of time for X amount of money. Now, if you are doing well in that contract, you do have opportunities to go back and renegotiate. They are more than happy to sit down with you if you have a large fan base, you're finding great success, you're moving to the title faster than they anticipated. Basically, you're doing things that are good for the business will be good to you. So the restrictive nature of the contracts, meaning you can't go elsewhere, meaning you can't go where there's some kind of contact being made. Guys are going to RAF, guys are doing jiu-jitsu tournaments, that's one thing. But you can't go to kickboxing or boxing or any other MMA league while you're in the UFC. Now, that seems restrictive when you're coming at it from the angle of, okay, guys have opportunities to do other things. But when you look at the UFC, they are the leader by far. And again, I'm not saying this because I love the UFC. It's the reality. The UFC is the leader by far. They have the largest media machine. They have the best TV contracts. They are the place that's developing talent to degrees that no other league currently can do. So why would the UFC give you a contract, develop your name, put you on the largest platforms in the world, and then allow you to go and take that momentum and benefit what could be considered a competitor to what the UFC is trying to do? It makes no sense from a business perspective to allow that. And that's why the business is designed the way it is. When you're in the UFC, you're a UFC guy. You can't go and fight for other promotions and use the UFC as your brand development vehicle. When you're in the UFC, that's the brand you fight for. That's the opportunity you have to develop your personal brand. But again, you can't take that and go use it within another organization that could potentially be a competitor. It makes total sense. Then you have the sponsor side of it. So originally the UFC couldn't afford to pay fighters what they felt was appropriate. So they sat down and said, okay, look, you can go get your sponsors and you can go make the money that we can't pay you. But when we can pay you better, we have to then take that sponsorship and put it under review, which they did. And if they found you had a sponsor that was contradictory or competitive with something the UFC was doing, yeah, you couldn't use it. And then eventually the UFC got rid of all external sponsorships. Everything was internal. And if you think about it again, if you're a brand, let's say you're Aviator, you're a liquor brand, which currently sponsors the UFC. If fighters were allowed for less money than what Aviator is paying the UFC to be on the octagon, if they were putting that on their shorts, why would Aviator pay the UFC any money? It doesn't make sense from a business perspective. So if someone's paying top dollar to be on that octagon, they're not going to allow smaller competitors to put logos on the fighters and diminish the UFC's ability to cut deals, which are growing the brand, which is allowing them to pay fighters better. Now, we can all argue that the pay is not as high as we would like it to be. And we keep throwing around that number. Let's say it's 15 to 18%. That's kind of high, actually. Let's just say 15%. If the UFC is paying out 15% of what it makes, and what it makes continues to increase year after year, fighter pay is increasing. So the percentage in which the UFC's overall business is increasing, fighter pay is increasing as well, because they are consistently paying out a certain percentage to fighters year after year. So we keep using these different arguments to say lower pay and whatever, but we do ignore the reality that pay is getting better year after year. Contracts are getting better. Things are making progress. Would we like the percentages to be higher for the athletes? Yes. But again, this now comes back to the other problem we have, which is the fighters themselves. So you take, let's say, Colby Covington. That contract we're talking about before, which is, say, a 4-fight deal for 18 months. You get offered a fight, you turn it down, your contract gets extended for 3 to 6 months. You get injured, your contract gets extended for your injury time. So it's not a guaranteed fixed 18 months. It's 18 months if you are willing and able to fight and you're turning stuff down or you get hurt. Now, Colby is that. Colby got hurt, so he's got injury time added to it. Colby is definitely turning down fights, which is adding time to that. Colby is then going and picking fights with guys outside of his weight class and acting as if he's trying to stay active. But when you're a 170 pounder and you're calling out Bo Nickel, by the way, Colby didn't call out Bo Nickel and say, let's fight at 185. He said, let's fight at 170. Bo Nickel's a big guy. I don't know if he can make 170 anymore. So it's a fake call out to make him look as if he's trying to be active and the UFC is turning him down, and he's using this weird social media push to try and create leverage. All he's doing is proving that he's difficult, he wants what he wants, and he really doesn't have the best interest of the league in mind. So why would the league accommodate this guy? Same situation with Arman Tsarukyan. Arman pulls out, I believe it was on Fight Week, to fight Islam. Now, back injury, okay. May be real, may not be real. But Arman pulled out with an injury on Fight Week on a pay-per-view against Islam. Then Moicano had to step in to fight Islam. Moicano was already booked. So Moicano's fight falls through. He steps up and fights Islam. Nobody really cared to see that fight. We're paying the same amount of money to watch that fight as we would have to watch Arman fight him. It was a nightmare for the UFC. So why is Arman not getting this big push? It's because he's proven to be difficult and untrustworthy. So the UFC is working with him to build the trust back. This is the dynamics that are going on. And the UFC is looking at the fighters, which, by the way, fighters all are a little bit crazy. For a living, they're getting locked into a cage to fight another human being. If you think that doesn't come with some baggage, you're nuts. Maybe as nuts as these fighters. And I say that with lots of love and respect because it's very difficult to do what they do. It's very difficult to navigate internally and externally what's going on to get into that cage and whatever. Ton of respect for them. I don't say any of this disrespectfully. Don't take my words out of context. So the fighters are a little bit crazy. They have a ton of pressure. They don't want to say yes to all the fights. The league needs them to fight. So yeah, there's conflict. And then you have the managers in the middle. There are very good managers that have very good relationships with the UFC. They have very good relationships with their people. They protect their fighters. They also protect their relationship with the league. They have enough business acumen to cut real deals. But then you also have an army of managers that literally knew somebody who knew somebody and were willing to make phone calls and ended up becoming managers. There's a mega manager in particular that has no real background in business that became a manager because he happened to be in the right place at the right time. And I'm not going to out it for what it is, but do your homework and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But it's ridiculous in a multi-billion dollar league that we have friends of a friend representing guys in there. I do believe we should have some kind of qualification like the NFL where at least take some kind of certification test or show some kind of educational background that allows you to have access to the kind of money that these contracts are producing. That's a whole nother conversation. But just look at it. The UFC as a league doesn't really have the ability to shelve you because they have guaranteed time commitments to get guys fights. They offer fights, people turn it down, so they have to penalize them for that. So they extend the contract. Guys get hurt, so they have to give them the opportunity to get better and have enough time to fight out the rest of their contract. So, as restrictive as it is, or as brutal as it tends to be painted as, it's all in terms of a league and business, it all makes sense. And then when you look at the people that have these contracts, it makes sense because you do have to reel these guys in and you do have to keep them on track, or else this can become complete chaos. I'm not saying that the execution of it is perfect, but the design of it absolutely makes sense. The contracts are not as restrictive as they are painted to be, and the restrictions that are in place are to protect the business, which is consistently growing and providing more and more opportunity and paying better and better and better. When I say they're paying better, it doesn't mean they're paying great. It means they're paying better than prior years. And that's the point. As long as it keeps moving forward, we keep having real conversations, we keep analyzing the structure, we're good. The contracts are not the problem. The problem right now is that we don't have a collective bargaining situation to define the structure in which the contracts are enforcing. Not allowing guys to fight for other promotions makes sense. Not allowing people to take the brand authority that they've been given and benefit competitors makes sense. Restricting athletes, what are they really restricting? They're not saying don't get sponsors. They're just saying you can't wear sponsors, your personal sponsor stuff when you're in a corporate event because the corporate event is being sponsored by its own people. It's all just simple math. So call me a shill or whatever, but the truth of it is the contracts make sense in terms of what this business does. And the fighters, they hurt themselves in a lot of ways when they go about the business the way they do, and they start to get entitled mentalities in regards to their positions in the league. There are guys that have not been good fits that have moved on and they've operated differently elsewhere to their own benefit. And that's okay. You should leave. If you don't agree with how the UFC is doing business, don't sign the deal. And then when your deal's up, if you don't like how the deal went down, go cut a deal somewhere else. Guys have done it. Francis Ngannou did it. Corey Anderson did it. Eddie Alvarez did it. It worked out well for them. So yes, you have more freedom than the internet is pushing. And the poor people like Colby Covington are not really poor. They are self-defeating individuals that are painting a narrative to try and create leverage because they don't want to fights that are being offered to them. They want to fight in other ways. And when you look at how fights are being designed right now, the UFC is in a place because of the Paramount deal. They have to put on maximum amount of entertainment, but they also have to maintain the structure of everyone's moving towards the belt. There are not a lot of people in the UFC right now that are not moving forward towards the belt. The spectacle aspect of it is really being weeded out. You have guys that are jumping weight classes, but they're jumping weight classes as a challenge for the belt. You have champion versus champion kind of situations that are coming around, but you don't have a lot of guys that are coming in just to put on a big show. Conor McGregor is probably the last of it, but in Conor's mind, he's going to be champ again one day. Michael Chandler is probably the only other person that I could think of that really has no ability to be champ, but sells enough tickets and brings enough eyeballs that he still has a job. But I don't think Michael Chandler's even going to have a job if he loses one more. And the Conor fight fell through for him. So what are you going to do with him? I don't know. He is truly the definition of a gatekeeper. I think that he will be offered a fight that will be make or break for him, and it will give a younger person an opportunity to make a name for themselves. Because again, that's the business. It is a league, and all roads have to lead towards the titles in an entertaining way that continues to allow the company to make money. So that percentage number we keep talking about is a percentage of a larger and larger and larger income pool so that the fighters are making more and more money. And the idea that there's some exodus to go other places, Pereira just signed an 8-fight deal. Ilya Topuria just signed a deal. Um, the biggest stars in the sport are signing big deals. And there's not a lot of guys saying, I need to be let go so I can go elsewhere, because in 2026, there is nowhere else to go. I do find it interesting that the PFL is talking about a rebranding. They have a new CEO. They're talking about trying to get a deal with Netflix. They're talking about changing the name potentially, and they may become a true competitor. But we are years away from that situation developing into anything that would resemble the juggernaut that is the UFC currently. The MVP situation on Netflix is a one-off currently. Even if they do more shows, will never be a true competitor. I think the average of age for the MVP show coming up is 36 years old. That is a little bit older than the talent pool that the UFC is putting out. We have a lot of aging stars fighting. I think it will be fun. It will be entertaining. Um, it's basically free because it's on Netflix. Netflix is also one of the largest streaming platforms, if not the largest in the world. So it will have a massive audience. It will probably have a larger audience than the average UFC pay-per-view in the past, current broadcast on Paramount. But that doesn't mean it is a competitor to the UFC. It just means it is the right thing at the right time in terms of getting viewership and getting a conversation started. So I'm talking about business here. I'm not talking about how we feel about this. I'm not talking about individual fighters that we like or don't like. We just have to temper a lot of what we're saying where we come emotionally to our responses to how things are being done, and just look at the nuts and bolts of it. Look at what things actually are. Leagues have to keep fighters active to keep the league going. Brands have to operate in a way that empowers them and enriches them, not the competitors. So yeah, the UFC is doing what it does to protect itself, and it is working with the athletes to provide what they need to keep them fighting, which is the business of the damn league. So it all makes sense on paper. Execution could be better, but it really does make sense if you look at it and take the emotion away. And like, don't talk about Dana, don't talk about Hunter, don't talk about the different names that get thrown around and get dumped on. Just look at the nuts and bolts, look at the business. All right. So this is Brian Wright. It's my 2 cents about contracts. Don't take it wrong. This is not me loving the UFC. This is me looking at it objectively from a business point of view, understanding how it works. I've been there, guys. I've signed the contracts. I've been through this many times. I know how it goes down. It's really straightforward. It's really pretty simple. I understand the athletes. I understand the company. We just have to, you know, open up our eyes to how things actually are going, and stop some of this pouring gasoline on a fire, because we benefit the fighters more by dealing with the reality of the system instead of creating all these false narratives that just piss people off and, dilute the conversation. So, all right, Brian Wright, peace. I'm out.